More marauders ahead. They hunt in packs. You'll have to get through them to find the behemoth.
I will.
Well, the day has finally come to review Behemoth, but this time on Meta Quest 3. And maybe you saw that access was given at the very last minute to all creators, leading me to do each platform individually. Now, Behemoth is getting a Day 7 patch for Quest, so this review is based on the review versions given to press and seen as a good representation of the game you will play at launch. And I want to warn you, this will feature some spoilers, because for you to understand the issues that I've come across, I have to tell you about some unlocks which you may have seen anyway on Skydance's official trailers, so they shouldn't come as too much of a surprise. But one question that most people wanted to know the answer to is how many behemoths are actually in the game, and there is only 4, which is kind of disappointing when we all want that Shadow of Colossus in VR experience, and I believe that game had 12. My playtime so far to complete the game is around 6 hours, and that's with trying to find all the resin and all the unlocks, making the game shorter than I expected. And the Quest version has, again, just like the PSVR 2 version, been a bit of a mixture of good and bad. On Quest, I'm pleased to report the Behemoth fights are epic to behold in VR, and there is nothing in VR quite like it. And when everything works well, it's a great experience taking one of them down. And when I say works well, that is around 60% of the time, because playing this game again, it's clear that some of these fights are tightly scripted, and if you stand in the wrong place or do the wrong thing, the first Behemoth staggers around trying to figure out where he needs to stand to be in the right place, actually helping you to take him down. In terms of ports, it's been interesting to see what they have done to get a game that looks this good running on PC and PSVR 2 running on Quest 3. And since this was the only version not shown in early access at hands-on events, I was worried this would be a Walking Dead Saints and Sinners Retribution launch all over again. But I'm pleased to say it's actually pretty good and in a much better condition than PSVR 2, at least as of right now. The very bad pop-in I noticed on PSVR 2 is at least 50 or 60% less on Quest, but if you look for it, you will find pop-in in far-off environments. I'm particularly impressed with the Behemoth parts of the game. There is more fog and a lack of effects, say when the Dread Stag slams his foot to the floor, and unfortunately every Behemoth fight had audio issues with music going in and out. But with all that being said, I couldn't quite believe how similar some parts of this version are indeed similar to PSVR 2, and visually that version is definitely not a slouch. But it is clear some sacrifices have been made to get this game running on Quest. Textures are sometimes low and slow to load in, and as part of the porting process, one area in particular has been hit very hard, giving me PTSD the first time I played Bulletstorm on Quest, but luckily this was the only time I saw anything this N64-ish. You'll also find fixed foveated rendering being used, and even though it's not visibly strong as some games I've seen in the past, it's definitely there. But on a positive note, I can't see any asynchronous space warp, which is something you often see in a PC to Quest port. You'll also experience some frame drops from time to time, but mostly after loading, and there's a stupidly long first ever load time made even longer by the developers forgetting to tell players to be patient and that the game is actually loading, and it's most likely optimizing the shaders. And one last thing before I move on for the visuals, which I really didn't understand, is how very dark the game can look. It can look fine when you're standing outside where the game is meant to be bright, but sometimes even in mildly lit areas you can't see what's in a chest right in front of you. So with all that explanation being said, overall visually the game does look good on Quest, and the Behemoth sections do look great, and each environment or chapter of the game looks unique, and when the game is firing on all cylinders for a standalone device, it does look nice. Most of your time in the game is spent fighting 4 to 5 enemy types with some extra hard mid-level bosses, and upon killing these bosses you can collect their helmets to display in your trophy room. The combat, if you roleplay, can be satisfying, but using the strength ability, which you can upgrade throughout the game, giving you more speed, extra health upon a kill, and even a homing attack when you throw the sword, kinda nerfs the combat, and you end up waiting for the power to recharge, which takes around 10 to 15 seconds, and then you just bowl straight back in, killing everything pretty easily. And even though the game has a lot of weapons, you end up using the same 3, which are to be considered the master weapons. These cannot be lost and are needed for key moments to keep progressing in the game, and they can all be upgraded by collecting a metal resin which you melt at a forge, allowing you to play blacksmith for a minute to upgrade your weapons. I need to mention that the weapon slots do get confused, but not as much as they did on PSVR 2, and if you drop one of the master weapons in the game, sometimes it wants you to grab them as like a ghost image instead of simply going back to the slot you selected, which can be especially annoying when you're trying to climb, say, a behemoth. The hook shot on your left arm is very cool and used for the puzzles, which mostly revolve around placing a block on a switch, but getting the blocks to the switch is the hard part, and some of them are a bit of a head scratcher and rely on some sort of rope physics. But I honestly really enjoyed these puzzles. The enemy AI seems better on Quest versus PSVR 2. None of them killed themselves throughout my playtime, but sometimes they don't know how to approach you, and instead choose to just stand still and wait for you to make your move. Again, versus PSVR 2, I never had any game-breaking bugs or impossible moments, but the bow did freak out a few times, which was fixed by a simple restart. Overall, the Quest version appears to have had some extra care put into it, but it still does need some patches to fix. But I would say, based on what I've played, they have poured more resources into the Quest version, probably because it's the biggest platform and they'll make the most money. If you want to see my PSVR 2 review, I'll leave it at the end of this video, but to summarise my time with Behemoth on Quest, it is a good game like I said before. I like the story, the environments, and when it's all working well, it feels great to play. But considering the patch is 7 days away, go in understanding there is some issues, but most of them, at least on Quest, can be fixed with a restart. Thank you ever so much for watching. Remember to please leave a like and subscribe for more VR content, and I'll see you on the next one.